We are continuing our coverage of Atlanta's here in Atlanta News First on our digital desk of Georgia's historic 2022 midterm elections coming up in just a few days. Record early voting turnout in an election that has drawn a lot of national political attention. And we're joined with Billy Michael Honor, who is the organizing director of the New Georgia Project Action Fund, an organization that is making a lot of hard work and a lot of effort in registering voters to turn out at the polls, not only in early voting, but also on election day on November 8th. So, sir, if you could just tell us a little bit about your organization and what y'all have been doing this election season.
Certainly, and thanks for having me. The New Georgia Project Action Fund is a civic engagement and civil rights organization working primarily in the state of Georgia. Our real goal is to do nothing more than to help build power among Black and Brown folks in the state. And we do that by getting them connected to the civic process. And one of those ways is through obviously voter engagement. But we also are organizing around a lot of other issues that we have heard from folks in the community that they want to see change created around. And so we're also an organizing entity as well.
What do you think has really sparked a lot of interest in this year's election? We're getting close to passing 2 million early votes or early ballots cast so far. What do you think is really gaining a lot of attention in this election?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a number of things. I think at the top of the list, for me at least, is that we have a really, 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 really important decision to make around who's going to be in the executive leadership of our state, as well as very possibly the controlling the Senate of the U.S. Senate of the United States. And so I think there are lots of people who are patched in that these at the top of the ticket races are really consequential to not just the kind of state that we're going to live in the future, but the type of country we're going to live in. And they want to weigh in on that through their. I think the other thing that we can highlight is that a lot of people are concerned about the Roe versus Wade overturning that took place this summer. So we see a lot of women in the communities that we serve are very animated and ready to go in and cast their vote for women's reproductive health and women's reproductive justice as well. So I think those are some of the things animating. And just in general, this is a rematch between Governor Kemp and Leader Abrams. And I think there was unfinished business for a lot of people from the last time around. If you support Abrams, and then people who want to come out if you support Governor Kemp and make sure that he gets the victory again. And so there's lots of people who just want to weigh in on the rematch, so to speak.
And this is a rematch of what was arguably the most watched gubernatorial race of 2018. And we've been saying it's really the most watched governor's rematch or race of 2022. Talking a little bit about abortion and social issues, what about the economy and inflation and gas prices and food prices? Many polls have shown that social issues such as abortion might be taking a back seat a little bit to economic issues. What's your response to that?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. I think for the communities we serve, a lot of our issues are what we call intersectional, meaning they relate to each other. And so we don't really have single issue people because there are no single issue humans, right? And so the truth is that economic issues relate to reproductive health issues. A lot of people make reproductive health decisions based on their economic circumstance. And the truth is, I don't know that there's any election where people aren't voting primarily on what we like to call their pocketbook issues, right? And so, sure, this election, we are in the midst of inflation. We are in the midst of a state that has rising affordable housing costs, particularly among renters. And we do hear that a lot from people, but quite frankly, we hear that every election, that those are the things that people are concerned about.
Talking a little bit about early voting, as we mentioned, we're on pace to surpass 2 million early votes. The state has really broken virtually every early voting record so far. And yet there are organizations that continue to allege that Georgia's election laws are quote unquote Jim Crow 2.0. And yet at the same time, we have record African American voter turnout so far. How do you reconcile those two differing perceptions?
Oh, it's pretty easy for me because the truth is people persist. People persist to vote despite some of the challenges, and that's what we see happening. The communities that we serve, I do think that there have been some changes made that have been helpful in terms of in voting, but by and large, there are lots of things that were put in place you'd be hard pressed to see how it actually helps to make it easier to vote. It actually adds more restrictions. But yet, people in our civic life are really diligent, really resilient, and what it does is it inspires people when they see these type of measures put in place to say we're not going to let this be an impediment. It's actually going to become motivation, right, for getting involved. And so I actually think that what we're seeing in terms of this early vote numbers and the high turnout is just people being motivated to say that a lot of the things that were put in place post 2020 in terms of some of the laws from SB 202 won't stop them from voting. They're going to vote anyway.
Do you believe Senate Bill 202 is Jim Crow 2.0?
I don't know about that. I mean, I know that's a term that's been used. What I do know is someone who, for the last 10 or 12 years, has probably organized more people to go out and give out water to people standing in long lines. I started the Pole Chaplains program that's now practiced all over the country. You can't tell me it was a nonpartisan program where simply we wanted to give water to people who had waited for many hours to vote, and now because of SB 202, it's illegal to give it out and to receive it. That's the criminalization of kindness, right? It's the criminalization of civic kindness, and you can't tell me how that actually helps to make voting easier, more accessible for someone like me who in the Obama, first time I voted in 2008 in the Obama and McCain election, it took me 9.5 hours to vote, right? And then in the second election, Obama, Mitt Romney, it took me 5.5 hours to vote. I was very happy when people were giving me snacks and water because I don't know if I would have made it. That's all I'm going to say.
Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger in his office will say that handing out water or snacks at a polling place usually happens is being distributed by folks who are actively involved in a particular campaign. How do you respond to that?
It's not true because I did it more than anybody else. All of our poll chaplains that we organized were nonpartisan people of faith communities who simply showed up to be what we would call a ministry of presence at the poll. And we told them in every training, it actually, we don't care who people are coming to vote for. We just want to make sure they get it done. We never made it a partisan activity. And so for someone who actually was on the ground, and I actually didn't see, let me just tell the truth, I actually didn't see many campaigns out there passing out water to people. I mean, that's not what you actually, ask yourself the question, if you are a campaign, what benefit do you get from giving out nondescript Dasani or whatever the water to people in line with no instruction about who they vote for? I think on election day, campaigns are knocking doors, passing out flyers to people in other places. Other people like us doing the nonpartisan work are the ones who are actually giving out the water.
How does an organization like the New Georgia Project Action Fund reach across partisan divides? We've talked about various voter organizing efforts, and there sometimes are done with a partisan approach, and yet every political philosophy or movement always is seeking to expand their quote unquote big tent. So how does an organization like yours reach across to individuals who are of a different partisan philosophy?
I believe we have no permanent friends, right? Just permanent issues and agendas that serve our community. And so that applies to the political situation. We put together this year what we call the Dirty South Democracy Voting Agenda and Community Organizing Plan. The issues on there are not partisan. They're just about how it is we live in more fuller, thriving communities. And quite frankly, whoever sides with those issues will be our allies, right? That's how we feel about it. When we go out, we're talking about those issues, not about the candidates. And so, sure, as history would have it, there are some political parties that may be more in alignment with our issues, but that happens to be what's happening right now. We know in the long, long scope of history, Abraham Lincoln was a Republican, right? Who helped to free the slaves. A very different Republican Party from that one, right? Today, some of us would say. And I'm only making the point to say that parties change with time, right? But our issues that we organize around are what we're most concerned about and who is in alignment with those issues.
So the election is going to be over very, very soon. I've been occupying a lot of our attention and effort, and yet what happens after November 8th? What happens with your organization? We have a presidential election in 2 years, and believe it or not, another governor's race in 4. So what are your plans for the future?
We keep on doing the work we've been doing, which means that during this period of time, we have knocked nearly 700,000 doors. When it's all said and done, we would have gotten over 140,000 people to fill out a voter pledge card, thousands to fill out a voter plan card, and takes our petition on Medicaid expansion and other issues. We're going to take all of that work that was done and say, now that the election is over, this is how we give you a plan to mobilize, of how to hold whoever is elected accountable so that we can begin to create the type of change that we need to see. So that's what we do. We're going to move on to the next part of the plan, which is mobilization of all of the voters and all of the people who turned out, so that they can begin to push their issues with whoever ends up being the victors.
There have been other voter mobilization efforts. Former Republican Georgia Senator Kelly Lefler has an organization called the Greater Georgia Project, who's obviously reaching out to folks. I'm assuming that the more your position is, the more people who are registered to vote, regardless of race, creed, color, ideology, and that's a good thing for us all. I'm assuming that's your position.
Listen, I believe in the marketplace of ideas, right? That's what I believe in. I believe democracy is built on that marketplace. And that means that if you have a bad idea, and I do believe that Kelly Loeffler has some bad ideas, but she has every right to have those bad ideas. She has a right to be wrong, right? And so that is her right. And I would fight for her right to be wrong any day, right? And so sure, we want to expand democracy. We want people to be able to cast whatever choice it is that is in alignment with their values. And I will fight for that every day of the week. But I'm also going to put forward the ideas that I think are best for how it is our communities should be formed, and encourage people to vote on those values.
So we're wrapping up our conversation with Billy Michael Honor, who is the organizing director of the New Georgia Project Action Fund. Final thoughts, anything you would like all of our viewers and listeners to know, either about your organization or the election coming up? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, we're excited because this week we have a Shock the System campaign going, because with all of the excitement of the early vote numbers, the one demographic of voters we like to see more from is voters 18 to 30 years old. And so we're asking all young Georgians to come out and vote on Friday, November the 4th, on a Shock the System day. Shock the system because at this point they think you're not going to turn out, but we believe that you will. And so come on, shock them, come out on Friday, vote, let your voice be heard.
Thanks all of you for watching Atlanta News First. Be sure to vote November 8th, if not before.